Hello. In this video we're going to talk about drugs to treat acid-peptic diseases. So generally in our GI tract we have a balance between defensive and aggressive factors. The aggressive factors being the stomach acid and the pepsin. But we have also ways to protect our gastrointestinal tract from the stomach acid like mucus and bicarbonate. Also the lower esophageal sphincter is helping us because this is a sphincter that prevents the stomach acid from coming back up into the esophagus. It should be usually rather tight and closed. But if these defensive factors are overwhelmed from aggressive factors, if you have too much of the aggressive factors, we can get diseases which are called acid-peptic diseases, such as ulcerations or also GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, when this lower esophageal sphincter, for example, is a little bit weak and stomach acid can get up into the esophagus. Now we have several drugs to restore this balance. But before we get to the drugs, let's briefly review how do we get stomach acid. So who makes stomach acid? So what I've drawn here is the parietal cell. And you can see here these proton pumps, and they pump out protons in exchange for potassium. So that's all your protons that you're going to have as your stomach acid. So that's the lumen of the stomach, and that's the parietal cell. So now what are the different stimuli to make more acid, to activate these proton pumps? Well, there are several stimuli. Let's start with the hormone. One hormone that stimulates the proton pump is gastrin. So it's a hormone, so it travels in the blood. So let's make here a blood vessel to remember it comes through the blood because gastrin is made in the G cells, in the antrum, and it needs to travel to the fundus and the corpus where these parietal cells sit to stimulate the gastrin receptor. That's a CCK2 receptor, which is going to stimulate these proton pumps. What are other mediators? There are also paracrine mediators, and this is histamine. So let's put in here, this is the H2 receptor, the histamine receptor. And where is actually histamine coming from? So it's a paracrine mediator. That means paracrine is next to it. It comes from the ECL cell. That's where histamine comes from. And then it stimulates the H2 receptor, which is also going to lead to the activation of the proton pump. And that's actually a GS-coupled receptor, and that's a GQ-coupled receptor. Then we have another GQ-coupled receptor, that's our M3 receptor, and that's stimulated by acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter, so it's released from neurons. So there are all these neurons here. It can release it, so that's releasing acetylcholine, stimulating this M3 receptor, which is also going to lead to an activation of the proton pump. So these are all different stimuli that lead to the activation of the proton pump, making more acid. And then we have here one other receptor. That's a prostaglandin receptor. That's the receptor EP3 receptor. And that's stimulated by PGE2, so prostaglandin. And that is actually inhibiting this proton pump. So let's make here an inhibitor. So this is a GI coupled receptor, and it has a dual role. It's not only inhibiting the proton pump, it's also this prostaglandin, the PGE2, is also activating some surface mucus cells to make more mucus. That's a mucosal cell. You can now see this double protective role of prostaglandins the one thing is inhibiting acid, the other thing is making more mucus. And you may remember that NSAIDs are specifically harmful to the gastrointestinal tract, and now you can see because why that is. Because if you take away prostaglandins, like you do with NSAIDs, you're lacking mucus production and make more acid because you take away this inhibitor.